So China might have just silently responded to America's plan to revalue its gold and buy Bitcoin. Now, I know this might sound a little bit conspiratorial or a little bit out there, but I think it might explain a lot of the strange price action that we've seen recently. We used to have a correlation to Bitcoin to the global M2. And guess what we used to have? Bitcoin used to follow gold's rallies 180 days after gold rallied. But all of this has broken in 2024, which has led a lot of people to start speculating who is suppressing the price of Bitcoin. We've looked at a lot of the popular theories over the past few weeks. It's been obvious that on Mondays and Tuesdays, there have been US entities suppressing the price of Bitcoin. That is very clear. But a theory that we haven't dived into yet is looking at America's plan to revalue gold. It's been very clear that the price of gold has been absolutely ripping previously. And I think we're starting to see some interesting signs in the Bitcoin market. Now, obviously, people this week, they were speculating that China's actually been quietly dumping their Bitcoin. I want to look at the on-chain data to back this theory up because I didn't really want to talk about it until I saw this come out this week. The Kingdom of Bhutan, who is, by the way, China's neighbor, they are right now pledging nearly their entire 10,000 Bitcoin stack to build a new city. And I just thought the timing of this coinciding with the rumors surrounding China recently selling 190,000 Bitcoin, I think this is interesting. So I want to put these two stories together and try to explain what might be going on between China and America. I want to start this rabbit hole with what Luke Groman is calling the gold revaluation theory. So let's listen to this clip, and then we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this rabbit hole.
Federal Reserve banks. It's a public document online. Mechanically, you can find this in the Financial Accounting Manual for Federal Reserve Banks. It's a public document online, section 2.10. Treasury can call the Fed and say, revalue the gold. It mechanically creates a deposit right into the Treasury General Account, or TGA. It's literally money creation using the gold. The Besson can do pretty much whatever he wants with. At 10,000, it's $2.5 trillion. At 20,000, it's $5 trillion. $5 trillion, you could buy back a lot of the Treasury market. You could buy back, let's put it this way, you could buy back the entire long end at $5 trillion, all of it. And so paradoxically, most people would say, oh, if gold's at 20,000, there's no bid for treasuries. It wouldn't need to be. He could buy the entire long end. Treasury yields would go down. 10-year treasury yields would go down in that case, not up. Would it be inflationary? Eventually. Is that what we need? Yeah. If we wanted, again, we can either win and bring back our defense industrial base, or we can have low inflation and a bond market that, that requires China and all the two preconditions. We can't do both. Inflation's in the cake. So that's why I think they haven't. That's what I think they are. I think they're eventually going to do that. I think part of it was, hey, let's try the Doge thing first, right? Because realpolitik is there's a bunch of people who thought they could Doge, like serious people. To me, it was like, guys, look at the math. This is like third grade math. Like, come on. But some very serious people were like, oh, yeah, they can Doge, and that's how we'll get out of this. I'm like, okay, well, have at it, right? And it was like, oh, we can't Doge. Like, oh, really? That's a surprise. Huh, interesting. So I think there were some political things they had to try first. But again, the debt doesn't care. The interest grows no matter what. Every day that goes on makes it more likely that this doesn't end in sort of a smooth sort of shift from icon to sand, but rather the big boulder running after us after we misjudge the amount of sand relative to the icon.
So that's the big question everybody's pondering right now. What is going on? Will the gold get sold, so to say? And I think when you run the maths and you have a look at the numbers, it's kind of interesting. The US Treasury is sitting on $750 billion of gold, but right now this is only valued at $11 billion. This is because the US government still hasn't decided to remark how they're pricing the gold. Right now, it's sitting at about $4,500 an ounce. And I think they're still valuing it at like $22 an ounce last time I checked. So again, this is just a no-brainer trade that America can run. And I think it's an economic wild card they've just had sat up their sleeve for a little while now. But let's not forget, America isn't the only country who has not only talked about this wild card, but has the potential to play it. I don't want to play this video. I want to be very respectful of your time today. But a couple of years ago, the Dutch central bank governor, he was essentially posed a question asking about their solvency over there in Europe. And he essentially said, look, the gold revaluation account is more than 20 billion euros, which we may not count as equity, but it is there. And again, this idea of a revaluation, it's been there for a long time. So here we go. I get to fact check myself live. The US is valuing its gold right now at $42.22 per ounce. And back when Balaji was tweeting this out a couple of years ago, gold was $2,000 an ounce. Guess what gold is now? It's over $4,500 per ounce. I was having a little bit of fun before this live stream, not only looking at the price of gold in dollars, but I wanted to look at it priced in treasuries, because this is the big trend shift that we're seeing today. For 50 years, the world saved in treasuries, in particular the 20-year US treasury. That's kind of what Luke was referring to in that clip a moment ago when he was saying the long end. The long end is your 20 years and your 30-year bonds. So I was kind of having a look here at gold priced in the 20-year US Treasury bond, and have a look at it. This is major Weimar vibes. This is insane when you really zoom out and chart this thing. If you look at it on a 3-month chart, like this is Weimar. This is looking hyperinflationary-esque. This thing's gone from 17 to 50 in the past 2 years. So it's nearly tripled, which is kind of wild when you think about it. Because again, we're charting major assets here. We're charting gold and the US 20-year Treasury bond. But again, I'll just remind you guys, this is merely a continuation of the trend. I think there's a really good chart of looking at the holdings of gold versus bonds. And for the first time in a very long time, we have officially seen an inflection point. We've officially seen central banks around the world hold more gold than holding treasuries. Again, this is massive signal. This is absolutely huge that we've seen this trend shift. This is a 50-year trend that's now gone the other way. So many people are just sleeping on this. I'm going to try to blow this chart up, make it as big as possible so you guys can see that. But the yellow line is gold holdings of central banks. It is now above the blue line for the first time in about 30 years. That was back in the 1990s. So everybody's kind of clear, like, look, gold in particular, sound money is going to be the future. But what is going to be the path that we take to get there? Now, this is where the kind of Chinese-American bifurcation comes into things. We can see, I saw this headline a little while ago, Trump's gold for Bitcoin shock plan targets the $38 trillion debt market. I think this is the theory that I haven't seen a lot of people talk about in a while we watch gold scream and Bitcoin, as we talked about in the introduction, break all of these correlations. Again, is Wall Street right now the ones suppressing the price? I did see this chart and I thought it was really fascinating. The blue line is skyrocketing. What the blue line is signaling is Coinbase volume. As we can see, this is now at an all-time high and it's absolutely exploded, which is kind of interesting. Is this American institutional demand buying the dip? It certainly could be. Now, what is really interesting, by the way, is we are seeing a lot of the OG dumping diminish. So you can see the big spikes of green on this chart. This shows where the long-term Bitcoin holders have been taking the most amount of profit and selling the most amount of coins. Right now, we're approaching much lower levels in this metric. So not only are we beginning to run out of sellers when it comes to the OGs, but now this is where I want to dive into this Chinese rabbit hole. Now, as you can see, I saw this tweet a couple of weeks ago, which is why I didn't make the video on it, because you can see it got fact-checked. Breaking: China has sold every single Bitcoin the government owned after Trump's tariffs announcement. So let's not forget, Trump essentially tried to tariff gold, which is why we saw a ton of gold leaving the UK and Europe and heading back on over to America. Now, a lot of people said maybe China, in response to that, not only started buying more gold, but also started selling its Bitcoin. Again, we don't have confirmation of what happened, but I saw a pretty interesting tweet I want to break down for you guys today. So this is an old tweet. This is 2 months old. And we can see it got fact-checked. False. There's no evidence. China's government sold Bitcoin after this tariff announcement. This is in November. But then what I find more interesting is if you kind of look at the trails, you can start to see some interesting developments in Southeast Asia. So, of course, like I mentioned in the introduction, China's neighbor, the Kingdom of Bhutan, right now is borrowing against its 10,000 Bitcoin stack to build what they're calling a mindfulness city. Now, it is interesting that they're not actually selling their Bitcoin. They're borrowing against it. And again, I'll remind you guys, if you were not aware, the Kingdom of Bhutan is the 5th biggest government holder of Bitcoin. Despite only having a population of, I think, about 800,000 people. So they're one of the smallest countries by population and by GDP. I'll remind you, the Kingdom of Bhutan, I think they have like a $2.5 billion GDP. So if you start thinking about that, the entire country's GDP is 2.5 billion. It's 3 billion at the time of recording. But their Bitcoin holdings is over $1 billion. So what, over 35% of their GDP is in Bitcoin. It's kind of wild when you think about it. Again, America's got a GDP at about 30 trillion. Imagine them trying to put 30% of their GDP into Bitcoin. It's impossible. Impossible. That would be $10 trillion. You can't do it. This is, again, why a lot of these smaller, more nimble nation states, they're going to benefit most from the Bitcoin standard. Bhutan are ballers for mining. They absolutely are. They've been silently mining up there in the Himalayan mountains since, I think, 2019, I believe. It's kind of wild when you think about it. Again, if you want to copy what the Kingdom of Bhutan is doing, I highly recommend you guys book a call with Blockware and learn more about how you can also silently mine Bitcoin like the Kingdom of Bhutan. I've got links down below for my partner Blockware if you do want to learn a little bit more about how you can get started mining. Again, mining isn't only great for tax write-offs. Again, my American friends can get a 100% tax depreciation write-off for buying Bitcoin mining hardware, but you can also just simply take advantage of one of 6 of the different hosted mining facilities that Blockware has all across America. So book a call with those guys below if you do want to learn a little bit more about how you can copy what the Kingdom of Bhutan has done. But again, I think it's the timing of this Kingdom of Bhutan announcement that had me a little bit interested this week. Because something else I saw this week was more people talking about China selling their Bitcoin, which is kind of fascinating to me. So I wanted to break down this tweet from Marty Party. He's got a big following on Twitter, and he wrote this: there is substantial on-chain and analytical evidence suggesting that the Chinese government has sold off most of its 194,000 seized Bitcoin. Now, again, this is the kicker. Again, I'll be very clear. Though no official confirmation from the Chinese government exists, and the remaining holdings estimates, they vary. Again, this is be very clear. We don't have official confirmation yet. But what we do have is ongoing sales reports from the local Chinese governments. Now, again, this is important because right now China is facing economic slowdown, and apparently their local Chinese governments have been liquidating their seized Bitcoin through private firms in offshore markets to replenish the public funds, despite the mainland trading ban. So Hong Kong FX brokers have been selling on the open market via OTC desks. Now, apparently, Reuters, they ran an investigation in April, and they documented that there has been a lot of selling. So this is the theory running around right now. As of late 2025, China is supposedly sitting on 15,000 Bitcoin, despite still officially supposed to be holding about 194,000 coins. So that would imply, again, we're speculating, we don't have official confirmation, but that would imply China sold 179,000 Bitcoin. To put that into perspective of just how consequential that would be, each year there's, I think, 164,000 Bitcoin mined. If China's just sold 180,000 coins, that's an entire year's worth of halving supply. This is the new supply that's brought onto the network. That's massive. Especially if you, again, because we're all kind of looking around for explanations for why the price of Bitcoins just kind of seem to be stuck here at $100,000. I think this Chinese theory, it's an interesting one to at least be aware of. Because we know, I think it's pretty clear right now that America's going one way. America's embracing Bitcoin and stablecoins. I think that's pretty simple and clear. And it's pretty clear that China is going the other way. I might have played you guys this short little clip the other day. I'll play it for anyone who might have missed it.
Put a lot of thought into the stablecoin regime, and as President Trump has directed, we are going to keep the U.S. the dominant reserve currency in the world, and we will use stablecoins to do that. Thank you.
So, I mean, it's Bessent's very vocal about this. Trump's been very vocal about this. What did Trump say a little while ago? We're going to give everybody a little bit of crypto and we're going to pay off the $38 trillion national debt. He openly said that. China looks to be pivoting very hard into gold and silver, and it looks as if, just speculating, but it looks as if America's going the Bitcoin route. And again, when we start thinking about things, the price action right now, Bitcoin, I've been watching Bitcoin for about 8 or 9 years now, since 2017. I haven't seen anything as manipulated as the past 3 months have looked since we saw that October 10th flash crash. That's just my personal opinion. But I mean, just have a look at how many BART patterns we've seen in Bitcoin in just the past 3 weeks. It's kind of insane. Pump, dump, pump, dump, pump, dump. I want to talk a little bit more about what Larry Fink said recently about leverage and liquidations. I might do a deep dive on that topic tomorrow for you guys, Saturday or Sunday. But I mean, just look at how many BART patterns there have been recently. This is kind of wild. I mean, this was more prevalent and common back in 2017 and 2018. But in particular, between 2020 and 2024, we didn't see a lot of this, just, I'll call it what it is, blatant manipulation. That's what it's looked like to me. It's very, very interesting. It's just in your face now. And I think this probably explains why we're seeing a lot of these patterns start to melt down. We're seeing, especially over the past 6 weeks for the first time, Bitcoin's broken its correlation to the M2 money supply. It's broken its correlation to gold. I don't know how you can still justify. Well, that was loud. I don't know how you can still say that Bitcoin's correlated to M2 in the short run. I think it's absolutely broken. It's wrecked. It's no longer following. It's no longer. I actually, by the way, I'll show you another chart that recently broke. That's actually the Bitcoin gold power law. So I found it strange that I hadn't heard much about the chart of the gold Bitcoin power law. I'm thinking, hang on a minute. I kept hearing a lot about that earlier in the year from everybody who loves models. And I dived in this week to have a look at why we haven't heard much about it. And that's because the model's flat out broken. We can see that we have a nice little probability distribution here. And right now, Bitcoin is 19 ounces. One Bitcoin, I think, is 19 ounces of gold. And we should only get as low as 22 ounces for one Bitcoin, 0.1% of the time. So that is 99.9% out there on the distribution skew. Right now, we're at 19.8. We're lower than that, which would be even more rare. And I kind of tweeted that, and I said, don't you think it's strange? It looks kind of broken to me. Creators of the model are saying, I'm aware that price is currently below the 0.1 quantile. Even though this can happen, it shouldn't persist for long. That's why I'm working on making the model more stable and accurate. So essentially, the model's broken. We're just going to remake the model. That's kind of interesting. So I did want to note that. The difference between gold ripping and Bitcoin dipping, it's gone so far. Suez broken the gold and Bitcoin power law. Now, I agree with this take. Absolutely. Bitcoin doesn't need China. China needs Bitcoin, and I think it is absolutely wrecking itself once again. China's making the same mistake it made in the early 1900s when they got completely demonetized by trying to follow a silver standard where the rest of the world was on a gold standard. They lost 80% of their value in a couple of decades. They're making the exact same mistake again. We absolutely all need Bitcoin. Again, I think right now, Bitcoin's on sale. $88,000 last time I checked. I'll check in on the price again in a minute. I think it's holiday season sale right now on Bitcoin. By the way, it is actually still, for the next 24 hours, a sale running on your favorite hardware wallets. So again, if you didn't get your hands on a Trezor or a Ledger in the Black Friday sale, I believe their holiday sale is still running for the next 24 to 48 hours. I think that is all over tomorrow. So go and take advantage of the massive discounts they've still got running. I think you can get 30% off the Trezor Safe 3, another 30% off the Trezor Safe 5, and Ledger is also running their holiday season sale where you can get up to 50% off on selected devices. You can get $70 of free Bitcoin if you go get a Ledger Flex. So go and take advantage of that while you still can. And again, while you're stocking up the Christmas stocking for Christmas, I always tell you, do not go out there and buy a Bitcoin hardware wallet without also backing up that hardware wallet and your Bitcoin private keys on something that is actually going to last for generation. Again, you should not be writing down your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words on paper. That's a terrible idea. You should only be putting your 12 or 24 words on titanium. That's why I always encourage you guys to check out what Stampseed has made. I think it's the go-to solution for your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words. Go and get your hands on anything you want to buy from Stampseed with a promo code Luke15. You can get that discount for the entire kit, the stamping kit. It's actually much easier than it looks to stamp a 12 or 24 word seed phrase into titanium. So again, Luke 15, that'll get you 15% off anything you want to buy from there. So this is, again, by the way, why we self-custody our Bitcoin. China doesn't trust the US. Russia doesn't trust the US. China doesn't trust anyone. We shouldn't trust anyone. This is why Bitcoin in self-custody is an absolute no-brainer. It's the only asset you can hold self-sovereignly. Now, again, this is an interesting comment as well. End of year options are coming. What's also very interesting about the Bitcoin price in particular is I think Bitcoin opened the year at $92,000. So if I jump on over here to the price chart of Bitcoin, again, I'll remind you guys, price is the least interesting thing about Bitcoin. It is a good measure of adoption when you zoom out. But if you look at Bitcoin's yearly candles, we opened the year, I believe, at like $92,000 or $93,000. We used to see a pattern of 3 green, 1 red. In bull runs, we'd see 3 greens, 1 red, 3 greens, 1 red. I have no idea where the price of Bitcoin is going to go in the short term. I'm very clear about that, have been for a long time. Eventually, all models and dogmas and expectations will be wrong. But I think another sacred cow in Bitcoin in particular that might be broken is, I'm just saying, maybe the guys who can manipulate the price in the short term might want to also break this model. And I don't know, maybe keep the price of Bitcoin under 92K for the rest of the, 1.5 weeks left in the year. It's kind of crazy that 2026 is that close, but it is. Christmas is next week. It's the 19th of December. And then Down Under Blues mentioned options expire next Friday, but the following Friday is Jan 1st, 2026, start of the new year. That could certainly be very interesting. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. And then all bets are off for what happens in 2026. I think 2026 will be very interesting. By the way, I did show you this chart. Again, who knows whether this China theory is right or wrong, but if it is true, and if they have been selling their Bitcoin, they're all out of Bitcoin. They've got 15,000 left. So sell pressure from China, if they've been selling, could be gone. OGs look to be slowing down their dumping of Bitcoin. And by the way, we've just absorbed a shit ton of selling from the OG Bitcoin holders. I hope that audio wasn't too loud for you guys. And it looks as if everybody is just becoming abundantly aware of what we should be doing. Getting out of these shit coins. This is a cool little graphic I saw this week. Looking at probably 3 of the strongest fiat currencies in the world over the past 20 years, you can see just how much purchasing power $100 or 100 units of each has lost. It's kind of wild when you get the visual comparison like this. All of them have lost, well, the dollar and the euro in particular has lost more than 30% of its value in the past 25 years alone. And even the Swiss franc has lost at least 12% of its value. So again, this is why we Bitcoin. This is why we need to opt out. Now, again, going back to what Bhutan is doing, I think what Bhutan is doing with this new city is super interesting. I first saw it and I thought, oh, hang on a minute. Are they selling their 10,000 Bitcoin to build a new mindfulness city? But they're apparently not. They're apparently borrowing against their Bitcoin, which is kind of interesting. I saw this headline here. They're going to be using collateralized lending and yield strategies without liquidating its sovereign reserves. I thought that's kind of strange. I was doing some digging, looking for what these yield strategies are. I couldn't find exactly what they're doing. Again, I saw that and I thought, Jesus, I hope people aren't copying them. So again, be very careful out there. Be very, very careful with what you're trusting to get yield on anything. I always tell you guys, if you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are probably the yield. There's a lot of borrowing options. There's a lot of lending options out there. There's a reason why I always encourage you guys to check out Firefish. It's because they're very open about the fact that here's the yield. We have a lender and a borrower on the platform. All we do is connect the two. So again, if you do want to learn about a safe way for you to borrow against your Bitcoin, I always encourage you guys to check out Firefish. You can see you can get an instant loan. You literally press request loan. Let's say I want it in 10K, 2-month loan. They give you the interest rate immediate. You hook up your bank account immediately and you can get funds in your bank account or stable coins in your stablecoin address if you prefer that within hours. So again, check out Firefish. They're going to give you 30% off if you use promo code Luke. Again, that's 30% off. That's a pretty big saving. We're not talking about half a basis point. It's a pretty big saving. Because again, I think markets from all standpoints, they look as if shit's about to get more volatile. I saw this as well this week. The Japanese 10-year government bond yield is going literally parabolic. Right now, that's at about 2%, and that's the highest rate this millennia. The last time we saw the Japanese 10-year government bond yield at 2% or higher was back in the 1990s. It's when I was born. That's a long time ago. So again, if this carry trade continues to unwind, I think that's fair. I'm not saying the whole thing's getting unwound tomorrow, but if it does continue trending that way, look out. I also saw this, by the way. I thought this was interesting. Urian Timmer is one of the head researchers over there at Fidelity, multi-trillion-dollar firm. He's officially flipped bearish on Bitcoin. Thought that was kind of interesting as well. Because I will say a lot of people are very indecisive on where Bitcoin goes right now. Ben Cohen, Leia, Urian Timmer, a lot of people are bearing. JP Morgan just rolled out a Bitcoin-related note. Bank of America's adopting Bitcoin. I think the next 3 to 6 months will be very interesting. That's all I'll say. I have no idea where it's going, but I do think the next 6 months will be very interesting. Just 10K lower. We shall see. We shall see what comes next. With all that said, guys, we've been going for 33 minutes. I'll try to wrap this thing up. I want to be super quick, respectful of your time tonight. If you enjoyed this one, I might put another link to a live stream I did this week looking at the price suppression, Bitcoin games in a little bit more detail. I'm going to put a link to that one somewhere around there that you should be able to click after the stream's finished. And with all that said, I'm going to get on out of here. Wish you all a happy Friday night. Don't go too crazy, and I'll see you on the next one.